Now we'll begin to put our landscape, our background on our actual spread. I want to just make sure to clarify which page you are working with. Here's my front cover, and then here is our lesson from lesson 2, the Meet Your Inner Artist. This third extended page with the masking tape, which I haven't done anything with yet. And then just make sure that you just turn one page, and that's the page we're working on right now. The other materials that I have available for this whole part of the lesson, my watercolors, and I will be going ahead to spray them with a spray bottle that just activates the watercolors a little bit, and that's a nice way to start. So those are ready to use in just a moment. I also have white acrylic paint. I happen to have mine in a tube. You can also use a product called gesso. If you don't have it, just feel free to go ahead and use white acrylic paint, and you can use the kind of just regular acrylic paints you can get at the craft store. This is black. I'm going to be using that for my black, so you need white and a dark color. It doesn't have to be black. It could be dark purple, dark blue, whatever, but some kind of source. And then the other thing that you will need are some colored pencils. I happen to have quite a few here, but you won't need many. And they can be Crayola colored pencils or whatever you want to use. So those are the items that you need for this next part, in addition to some brushes. I have this wide brush, which will help the paint go on a little bit faster. And then a brush to use with my acrylic paints. And then this other brush is a brush that I'm going to be using with some stencils. And I have these plastic stencils. Here, a couple of, this one has a lot of houses on it. This one, it also has houses and this big eye in the middle. Anyway, those are the two that I'm going to use. You can use whatever stencils you have, or rubber stamps if you'd like to use those. So those are the things to collect before you begin this next section. I have my water handy here, and I'm going to go ahead and wet this entire page with just plain water, clean water. We're going to be painting a landscape. And this is not too detailed, but it has the main elements of a landscape: some sky, some kind of ground, and maybe something in the middle. You might want to put some mountains or something like that. So I'm going to start with my sky up here. Ooh, that's bright. That's one of those times when I was like, oh, I didn't want that blue, but okay, and there I found it again. So I'm going to change my blues out here a little bit, because that's quite bright. It's almost a beachy kind of blue, and I was heading for the mountains. So if you do get colors that that's not what you wanted, you can always use a paper towel to lift up some of the colors. So there's my blue to start with here. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that kind of light until I see what else happens with the rest of the landscape. The next thing I'm going to add is some ground down here at the bottom, and using browns. Okay, so then what I'm going to do in the middle is, I think, some purple. to make some mountains. Our next step is to add stencils to the background. These are kind of like shadows of what's going on in the landscape. Um, and as I mentioned, I have stencils, this one, and I think the other one that I'm going to use is this one that has houses on it here. You can use whatever stencil you have or a rubber stamp if you'd like to use that. Get my white paint ready. I'm using just a regular ceramic plate. Paint mixes really well on ceramic, and it washes off pretty easily, so that's a good tip. The other thing I have nearby is one of my cutouts, and I'm going to actually cover all of the print except for what I have drawn boxes around with white paint. So I have it here so I can just do it while my brush is wet with white. So I'm going to get my brush a little bit damp and pick up some paint. And actually, I have a stencil brush. That's what I'm going to use. This is a brush that's made actually for stencils, but you can just use any brush will work. So just going to place the stencil on the page wherever it strikes me to do so, and just begin to put paint on. And I won't be filling up the entire or using the entire design on this, just part of it. And that part you can choose whatever you want to do. So you can be doing this with gesso or white acrylic paint. If you use gesso, just know that it doesn't come off your stencil very easily, so you want to go ahead and make sure that you wash it fairly soon after you finish the stenciling. As I mentioned, gesso is not necessary. You can use simply white acrylic paint you can get at any hobby store for a very reasonable price. And then while my paintbrush is wet with the white paint, I'm going to take my character here and create a shadow using still my stencil brush. I'm going to go around the character and create like a shadow on the page. Tricky to hold all this and not get in the way of the camera. You can see I'm going over my house stencil there, and that's just part of the layering that will have meaning for us later, or maybe not. All right, so there's the outline of my person. I'm going to put my book aside for just a moment and continue to paint. For this one, I'm going to put the stencil brush down and use just a regular brush to cover all the text except for what has boxes. I'm going to do the black covering for my the candle, which is an interesting coloring, but I really want to save that colorful tree and use colored pencils on that, which is our third way of covering. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse out my brush so we get the white out of it, and then this black paint is thinner. It looks like it's not going to cover completely, and that's okay too. And I'm going to be coloring the tree with my colored pencils. Now we're going to glue our shapes onto our landscape. And so I'm just going to play around with placing mine a little bit here. And they can overlap, easily overlap. I think I like these two over here. Think about the candle here in a moment.